Australia. Everywhere you looked, people were infringing copyright. Almost made being a copyright cop too easy. Until I met Alice, an inventor, out to save the world. She ranted about fair use when we hauled her in. I'd heard that before. It's an American copyright exception that everybody thinks applies in Australia. But Alice was also armed with a 2014 Australian Law Reform Commission report that recommended Australia introduce a fair use copyright exception. But why did everybody think fair use would save Australian copyright law? I had to know. Oh, I'm glad you asked, Alice said with a smile. There's so many reasons. But first, a fair use exception is flexible and technology neutral. How? I asked. How is it more flexible? Well, Alice said, in the US, the courts weigh up a variety of separate principles to determine if your use of copyright material was fair, such as what you used the material for and whether you'll harm the copyright owner's market. But a fair use exception isn't tied to any specific use or technology. This allows the law to better adapt to any new or emerging tech, or new commercial and consumer practices. But why is that any better than our fair dealing exceptions? I asked. Alice sighed. Because Australia's current fair dealing exceptions are so specific and complex that they've got very narrow application. You've got to fall within the precise circumstances where an exception applies, such as parody or satire or reporting the news. But all these exceptions were drafted in retrospect and reflect circumstances and technology that existed at the time. Parliament's always playing a very slow game of catch-up. Alice rolled her eyes. It only became legal to use a video recorder 22 years after US courts decided it was fair use. But in our emerging digital economy, we can't afford to wait that long. New technology and uses can emerge rapidly in ways our current laws aren't prepared for. We can't predict the future, but a flexible, tech-neutral fair use exception means copyright can adapt to anything new which comes our way. Alice sat there grinning, but I wasn't convinced. What else is fair use good for? I grumbled. There's definitely more, she said. For inventors like me, fair use can encourage innovation. Australia is currently a hostile regulatory market, preventing many beneficial innovations from emerging. And that's because, unless I fall within a fair dealing, I can't use unlicensed copyright material, even if my use is innovative or socially useful. Alice's eyes lit up. But under fair use, if I've got an innovative idea for copyright material, I don't need to ask permission, she said, as long as my use is fair. This is very important for public interest and transformative uses, where copyright material is used for a purpose different from that originally envisaged by its creator. I challenged her. Give me one example where that's actually happened. Her reply was immediate. Google Books. It was an innovative and efficient way to find new books, preserve old or out-of-print publications, and improve access for people with print disabilities. But it needed the fair use exception, because scanning and uploading books infringed copyright. Alice glanced in my direction. Think of all the other innovations Australia might miss out on without a fair use exception, she said. Like accessible text formats for people with vision impairments, or using orphan works, copyright material with no identifiable owner. But hang on, I said. Doesn't copyright already provide incentive to innovate by giving rights holders a limited monopoly over their work? Alice frowned. But that monopoly shouldn't extend indefinitely, or into markets the original creator had no intention to exploit. Fair use gives breathing room for those new works and productive innovations that use copyright material. Darn, I thought. I was convinced. Fair use is flexible, tech-neutral, and promotes innovation. And there's plenty more arguments in this debate, she said, heading to the door. But you'll need to read them for yourself. But as Alice stepped out into the night, all I thought was, fair use, the exception Australia deserves, but also the exception that it needs.